Hello, Facebook. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Brett Barker and I am the National Committee Man for the Iowa Federation of Young Republicans. And we're looking forward to having the 2nd District Forum here this evening. We have a good lineup coming and look forward to bringing some of the question and answer session to you. Before we get started, there's a few things wanted to cover. First, who are the Young Republicans? We are a group of Republicans. The voting age in our organization is between 18 and 40, but we do have auxiliary members of all ages. We are across the state working to elect Republicans, especially this November is what we're focused on. So looking forward to bringing some information about the primary election to you. How you can learn more about us or join us would be to go to our website at iowawire.com. We'd love to have your support. We're really excited about the support we've been building across the state of Iowa. We have chapters growing across the state. We recently rechartered last summer, but it's a old organization, one of the oldest Republican auxiliary organizations in the country. But we just rechartered here in Iowa last summer and are definitely on full steam. Other information, we'd love to have your support. Senator Grassley has been a big supporter and he has a challenge campaign. We have $230 left of his matching challenge. So if you are interested and have some means and you'd like to help out young Republicans across the state, we'd love to have your support. You can, again, visit our website at iowawire.com. What we are doing is trying to engage, equip, and energize young Republicans. We'll be doing deployments throughout the election, trying to tip some races in our favor. So looking forward to all that work. As far as the format tonight, each candidate will come in, they'll have 15 minutes to do question answer. We would encourage you to drop questions in the chat. We'd love to answer your questions tonight. So if you have some, please leave those for us in the chat. Other than that, we also were very saddened to hear the news about Bobby Schilling, and we do have a statement here from the Young Republicans, but it's definitely tough news and we're thinking of him. The statement is, the Iowa Federation of Young Republicans is saddened to hear from Bobby Schilling about his cancer diagnosis. Bobby is a fighter and we know he will bring his fighting spirit to this battle. Our thoughts and prayers are with Bobby and his family during this time, and we definitely, we're looking forward to speaking with him, but he's got other things that are more important and definitely are praying for him today. So with that, again, definitely put your questions in the chat for us so that we can monitor those. Otherwise, that has gotten us through most of our prep. So again, each candidate, we'll bring the first one in here in just a second. We'll have 15 minutes. They'll introduce themselves, get to answer some questions. I have a 1-minute warning that we will provide them when it's time. So let's go ahead and bring our first guest in. Okay, so our first guest is Mariannette Miller-Meeks, and I think she's getting connected into us right now.
I can hear you.
Let me see if I have to authorize you to start a video or not. Let's see. Something pop up on your end?
Yes.
Perfect. Now it works. So sorry about that technical difficulty there. It's good to see you this evening.
Thank you. How are you this evening?
Very good. So to get started, how about if you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and whatever other opening remarks you'd like to leave us with.
I'm Mariannette Miller-Meeks and I'm running for Congress in Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. My pathway to getting here has been a little bit of a challenging one. I am the 4th of 8 kids. I left home at 16 in order to work and put myself through school. My dad was a Master Sergeant in the Air Force. My mom had gotten a GED. And at that time, no one in my family had gone to college. When I was 15, I was burned and I had severe burns on my arms and legs. And during that hospitalization, decided I wanted to be a doctor. So I told my parents this when I got out of the hospital, and they kind of looked at me like I had, eyes. Typically parents try to let you know what the real world is like and that they're not going to let an enlisted man's daughter go to medical school. So while they were discouraging me, I decided to rebel. And my former rebellion was to leave home at 16, get a job, work, enlist in the Army at age 18. I continued to work and go to school until I was able to get a degree in nursing. I ended up getting promoted to 2nd lieutenant, spent 24 years in the military, active duty and reserve. And I was able to get a degree in nursing and then go to medical school and come to Iowa over 30 years ago to do my residency in ophthalmology and have been here since that time. if anything, what my background underscores is that I don't quit, I don't give up, and I keep fighting. And when I watched the Democrat debates last summer, and then I kept getting asked by my patients and other supporters to run for Congress again, I thought about what I was seeing, what was happening, and I realized that we need to make those sacrifices to step up and fight for those things that are important. I knew that we could have healthcare, accessible, affordable healthcare that gives us choice, skills training and apprenticeships that prepare our workforce for the 21st century. And that's going to be especially important in light of the pandemic. Trade agreements that are fair. And now with the pandemic, we know we need to bring manufacturing back to the United States more than ever. So looking at the things that I felt were important issues on the federal level, I decided to step up to the plate and run for Congress. So we've been able to mount a campaign, raise money. We've been endorsed by Senator Joni Ernst, Governor Kim Reynolds, Ambassador Terry Branstad, multiple legislators, both on the federal level, on the state level. We've been able to mount a campaign that's serious, and we'll be able to take on Rita Hart. And I think this election cycle, we always hear, I know you all are very old, but you're old enough to have heard previous elections where they say, this is the most important election of our lifetime. I think when you seriously have Democrats at presidential debates talking about open borders, free healthcare for illegal immigrants, Medicare for all, free college tuition, when you hear that and you understand that you're the generation that this debt falls to, this probably is the most important election of our lifetimes. This is a philosophical election about which direction this country goes in. And I think that I'm the candidate that is ready, willing, and able to take on that challenge.
Very good. I know also you've served in the state Senate, so maybe are there things in your tenure there that you're especially proud of and you think you'd want Iowans to know about as that background?
Yeah, my state Senate seat. So we're in a district that is a Democrat district. We are not a far right district. I would say it's more of a purple district right now than far Democrat. My Senate district is also 4 counties within the 24 counties of our congressional district. It is also a Democrat district. And in the blue wave of 2018, I won with an overwhelming margin of blue district. So I know that we have the capacity to win and win on ideas. My state Senate record certainly voted for a constitutional amendment that gives us the right to bear arms and can only be removed under strict scrutiny. We also passed 2 pro-life amendments, both in 2019 and then again this year. I'm also proud of the things I did in reducing regulation. I was chair of Human Services, vice chair of Veterans. And in Human Services, we passed a bill for oral contraceptives over the counter, which for young women is an important aspect. We also got rid of pre-authorizations or excess regulation for substance use disorder, smoking cessation. But also very importantly, we balanced our budget. By law, we cannot spend over 99% of our revenues, but we did even less than that. And because of our very prudent conservative fiscal policies, our state is actually in a better place now through the pandemic than many other states. So I think what we did in our budget, how we appropriated things and stayed under that 99% cap is very important and has allowed us to do as well as our state is doing. So right now we're not talking about cutting our fiscal year, which ends June 30th. We're actually able to fulfill the promises we made when we were in session last year.
Very good. And you hit on one thing there, and that's Iowa's strong fiscal position. I know I hear a lot about Congress bailing different states out. Do you have thoughts about that? And then also thoughts about the overall government response to coronavirus, whether it be state or federal?
So the first question is about bailing out states. I think that's the House bill. And I think it's interesting when you see that Cindy Axne, although I'm not running for their seats, but when you see Cindy Axne and Abby Finkenauer vote against it, and Dave Loebsack can vote for it because he's not running for re-election, that tells you that the Democrats are trying to give a pass to members of their party because they know it's not very favorable. We have a fiscally conservative state because we have the Republicans have the majority in the House, in the Senate, and we have the governor's office. That is not true of every state. And I don't think the taxpayers of Iowa or any other state should be bailing out the bad fiscal policies of another state. That only rewards them. We should not be bailing out the pension obligations of Illinois or New York or California, for example. So this would not be something that I would support conceptually or in reality. As far as the response to the coronavirus, originally, the data and information we had looked very ominous. We knew that China was not telling everything. We know that the WHO had not acknowledged warnings from Taiwan that there was human-to-human transmission. And as we started seeing what was happening, President Trump closed down travel from China at the end of January. But nonetheless, we saw what was happening in Italy, what we saw happening in South Korea. And when we had the projections of how much illness there would be, what the mortality would be, and how much hospital capacity, I think it was appropriate that we slowed down things and we had people limit their connections with each other as far as closing down businesses, closing down schools, social distancing. But that has a huge economic toll. And you'll hear this refrain, you know, this is life versus the economy. It's really not life versus the economy. It's life versus life. So as we've gained more information about the virus, then it's appropriate to take that scientific data and information and to put that into context of what we see now. And I think appropriately so, our governor has started reopening our state and made additional proclamations this week as far as reopening. And I think that's the appropriate thing to do using the science that we have. However, in order for people to use their own sense and sensibility to determine what level of risk they're willing to take, they have to have accurate information. So I think it's imperative that both on the state, local, state, and federal government level, we have to have accurate information. We have to have information about how the virus performs, who's most at risk, what are the repercussions, do we have the hospital capacity, what's the mortality rate, are there things that we can do to protect ourselves? And we also need to acknowledge that just as we're 50 states or laboratories of democracy, the virus is really underscoring that. The virus does not respond the same in every state. New York is not the tip of the spear. New York is the spear. Every state is not like New York, and therefore the policies that are good for New York or New York City are not necessarily policies that should be imported or adopted by every other state or county. So I think the governor's approach, county by county, using the data and information we have, tracking the hospital data to make sure we had enough capacity, was the right approach.
Very good. And coming off of that, there's another question in the chat here, which is a good one. It says, as a former director of Iowa Department of Public Health, what did you learn from that experience that has formed your ideals as a candidate for the House of Representatives?
One of the things that taught me, which I knew, but it wasn't sunk into my gray matter or my heart. And that is bureaucracies, departments, department heads, they make rules, and those rules are laws. So typically we think of monitoring the legislature for the laws that they make, and we forget about the departments and the department heads. So who governors and presidents appoint to be department heads is critically important. And there is no better example of that than what we have seen right now with General Flynn, what we saw the FBI doing, the CIA doing, the Attorney General's office, how those organizations colluded in order to undermine a duly elected president. And people go to jail for that. So the government has tremendous power over its citizens. And so I think learning that, the bureaucracy exists, it compounds upon itself, it has tremendous power, and it has rulemaking authority, which is the same as a law, that we have to be very careful who we put into positions as department heads, and they really need to monitor what's going on in those departments. Most of these employees are lifetime employees. You can't fire them, you can't terminate them. So you have to be very cautious in departments and who's in department heads. That's one of the lessons I learned. And that was a tremendously valuable lesson. I also learned how to build consensus, how to interact with people, how to interact with the legislature, how to achieve things that you need to do in the best interest of the people that you're serving. So I think all of those were valuable lessons, but the power of the bureaucracy is amazing.
That is very true. And you hear a lot about draining the swamp and all that stuff, and you got to deal with some of that. So one question I wanted to ask is, obviously you go online and you read all sorts of things. So, you know, there are folks out there questioning your own conservative credentials in certain areas. So Could you tell us what is your position on the life issue in particular?
So I'm pro-life. You would think as many forums I've participated in, as many interviews as I've done, having run for Congress or the state Senate, that I would not make a rookie mistake. I did. I know what I was thinking as I said what I said, and I thought I said that I was not pro-choice because there are Catholics who are pro-choice. We have Biden, Nancy Pelosi. Even though the life issue for Catholics is an extraordinarily important issue, I participated in 40 Days to Life. And I think it's an important question to ask because you want to know how a person is going to vote if they're elected. So people use that in order to make a decision on how to vote because they want to know, what are you going to do once you're elected? And I think when you look at my voting record is solid on the life issue. I am the only woman that stood up on the Senate floor in favor and in support of the Life Amendment. I voted on it 2 years in a row. In 2019, I was not running for Congress and I voted on it. We defunded Planned Parenthood in our HHS budget, and I was the chair of that committee. And I also voted for judicial nomination reform. So I think my record is very solid on that issue. And I apologize that I made a mistake. I don't, it's not the embarrassment. It adds to confusion, and I understand why people are concerned about it and why they would ask about it.
Pretty good. And with that district, I know you've run in that district before, and obviously things change over time. So what do you feel is different about that dynamic this election season versus some of the ones in the past?
Before in the past, so we have a Democrat district, and what you're trying to do, just like my Senate district, is to win the independents. That's the biggest voting bloc, or the non-party voters. I was very close to doing that, and I got reminded that every time I ran against Representative Loebsack, who is a fairly popular incumbent, I took a greater and greater percentage of the vote with each election. So we started out with 26% registered Republican, and what we've seen is that the district has shifted. So the district went for Obama twice, but then it went for Trump in 2016. And I saw that even in my own task of running for state Senate. When we were door knocking, I would have Democrats tell me that they were tired of voting Democrat. They don't see anything changing, especially in our Senate district. We're a district that has higher levels of unemployment and lower wage scale. And so they just didn't see that, their interests were being promoted. So President Trump really struck a chord with those individuals. And he won our district by 4 points. It's now an open district. That makes a difference. You have a pandemic right now, and who would be better to put into Congress than a doctor, former director of public health, a military veteran, and someone who has legislative experience? I think that goes a long way. The other thing that we see in our opponent is that she was the lieutenant governor pick for Fred Hubble. She's not well known, and she also did not carry her Senate district for Fred Hubble, the gubernatorial candidate for the Democrats. I think all of those are important things to look at when deciding how we can win this seat. So I definitely think the seat is winnable. I did better every time against an incumbent. I won a state Senate seat in a blue district in a blue wave, and I think we have the right message.
Very good. And with that, we've got about a minute left. So are there any final thoughts you want to leave us with this evening?
I just want to thank you for taking the time to interview the candidates, for being willing to participate in the democratic process. I know it takes a lot of time out of people's busy schedule, so I appreciate being given this opportunity. I would certainly respectfully and humbly ask for people's vote, and they can visit my website at millermeeks2020.com. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Be safe and be well.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so our next guest is going to pop in here. And that's going to be Stephen Early. Looks like we're getting connected to audio here.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, I hope that this is good for both of us.
I think it will be. So to get started, would you mind introducing yourself and telling me a little bit about why you're in the race here?
My name is Stephen Everly. I'm 69 years old, and I'm a businessman. and the common man with common sense. And I believe it's absolutely necessary we send citizen legislators to Washington instead of career politicians.
And so can you tell me a little bit about your background and your biography? Things like, where you're from, what your career is, things of that nature.
I was born in Iowa, small town of Pleasantville. I live approximately 12 miles from where I was born. I have lived my entire life in Iowa, but I have traveled in almost every state of the union and worked. I've also worked in several foreign countries. I have run a business with my wife and my son for the last 33 years in Knoxville, Iowa. In this process, I've been involved with cases with the federal DOJ under President Bush and then also under President Barack Obama. I've also gone to Washington and represented organizations such as Associated Builders and Contractors, trying to convince our representatives to do the right thing with health insurance, work rules, public bid contracts. I've been involved in other foreign relationships. I consulted on the Chinese Olympics for a company that we used to represent. And I've had to deal with government in every facet there is, and I would like to see the congressmen and senators have to live under the same laws and rules that the rest of us have to.
So speaking of Congress, what do you feel is something that Congress has done well, and where do you feel there's most room for improvement?
Boy, that's now a tough question. What they have done well. Well, I used to say they had orderly meetings, but we can avoid that today. So I think they've gone past the enumerated powers in the Constitution. And in so doing, and this is not just the Congress, this is the all three branches of government, have gotten our country in a terrible financial state, as well as other problems that need to be addressed. I can point the Supreme Court back to Marbury versus Madison, excuse me, on my tongue tied, as something that Congress should have stopped at the time that decision was made. It also goes into the fact we look at the Supreme Court as being the last arbiter of constitutional law. If that were the case, the Dred Scott decision would still be in power, and there is nobody, I believe, in the United States that ever wants to return to that point in time in our history.
So obviously there's several candidates in the race for the 2nd district. Why do you feel that you would best represent the voters in the district?
Because I'm a working man. This is a blue-collar district. I'm involved in farming as well as every aspect. I was asked earlier today about the ethanol industry. Mm-hmm. I'm probably the only guy here in this race that's worked at least 2 ethanol plants, one at Cargill in Eddyville and also Cargill in Blair, Nebraska. I've been involved with ethanol production. I've also worked in nuclear power plants, wind farms, solar arrays, and every aspect of energy. Also have some connection to oil production. And once I actually worked in a coal mine, but I will tell you, that lasted about 4 hours and they scared me out. So first time a charge went off when we were underground and a piece of the ceiling fell out the size of the Volkswagen, I decided that I needed a different career. I left promptly after that.
Very neat. So it sounds like you've had a bunch of different jobs in the energy industry. So maybe tell us a little bit about your feeling around energy in general and also how that impacts the environment.
Well, my personal opinion is there was a time I was against nuclear power because of all the waste product that was produced. But since then, we found a method by which we can concentrate the waste product, reuse it, so we have much, much less radioactive material to get rid of. Now, we still have a lot of stuff left over from World War II up to approximately the early 90s that we still have to maintain. Yucca Mountain is where that is. I bid a project in the Yucca Mountain, did not get it. But I believe that if you're totally against fossil fuels, nuclear has to play a role. Personally, solar and wind will work very good for an individual, but for a community, I'm not sold on it, even though I've worked on them and maintain them. Also taught classes on maintenance of wind generation and also other electrical classes for apprentices.
Very good. And obviously right now it's a tough time in both agriculture and in the renewable fuels industry. Are there things that you see that Congress could do right now to help those two sectors of our economy?
Well, I truly believe that renewable fuels is a segment of our energy production we have to keep. Now, I'm not very good at subsidizing energies or industries, but if we remove, I consider when you remove taxes off of an industry, that is not giving them a subsidy. All that is reducing the amount of their cost of operation. I look at it the same way with individuals in taxation. There was a time we didn't have income tax. We have never explored going back to that period of method of taxation, although I have worked in other countries that did use alternative forms of taxation. Some I agree with and some I definitely don't agree with. The tariff issue is a big issue. We have to, in some aspect, protect our own industries to keep our supply chains and our people employed. We cannot keep exporting all our jobs to China, India, and Vietnam, or even Mexico. We have to build stuff in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I am a firm believer that we have, as government, we have to encourage business to do so.
Are there particular ideas you have in order to do that encouragement?
Well, I am a supporter of Donald Trump's targeted tariffs. If you can't have free and equal trade, then you have to rely on tariffs. But I've worked in countries where tariffs were over 1,000%, and the tariffs were a method that they used to tax citizens for needed goods. So everything has everything done in moderation, never getting crazy on it. You know, if a man drinks 2 glasses of wine a night, it's not the same as a man who drinks a case of wine a night. So one is in moderation, and that we have to have moderation in everything.
Very good. And obviously a big topic right now has been coronavirus and response to that. How do you feel about the government's response to coronavirus, both at the federal and at the state level?
I think it's abhorrent. I think it's terrible. I understand if somebody came to you and said, if we do not do anything, up to 10% of our population will die in 3 months, and you were in government, you would try anything you could to stop this. Absolutely, you would bring out all the stops. We have done that. But now that we find that the death rate of people that are infected is around anywhere from 0.2% to 0.4%, then which is equivalent to, say, the SARS epidemic or other things that we didn't close down our society on. We just don't have any information coming out of the CDC or the WHO that makes any sense. And we've relied on the experts. An old boy that I used to work with used to say what an expert was. That's a drip under pressure. Sometimes people that consider them the smartest people in the room should learn a little more humility and common sense. We have dug ourselves an enormous financial hole. We're going to add between $6 and $8 trillion in debt to our overall blooming debt that our grandchildren, great grandchildren, and people that are not yet even conceived to be born in the next 3 generations are going to have to deal with this debt. Mm-hmm. And if you want to inspire the economy, remove taxes, have a tax holiday, 3 months, 6 months for businesses and individuals. Encourage businesses to come back to the United States. But the coronavirus itself, I and my entire family has suffered with the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. I got it in early March, and I was sick for about 3.5 weeks. I am in that demographic that most doctors worry about. And one of the problems was the medical profession didn't know how to treat it. They're still learning how to treat it. I'm not so sure they ever got a clue. And as a result, if we don't have herd immunity, and we don't open this market up, we're devastating. I have relatives that work in the medical field, and one of my sisters works in a hospital that they would normally have 190 to 220 patients. They have 2 because the governor ordered no thing done until the coronavirus was controlled. Well, you have people that don't get cancer treatment, don't get screening. They're terrified to come to the hospital, even though they're ill, because we've terrified a whole generation of people, young and old, that this invisible plague will kill us all. And my son, who's in his mid-30s, one of my sons, he was sick a day and a half at most. My wife and I, we had lingering issues for 3 to 4 weeks. My grandson, who was exposed, he had no symptoms, and he's 11.
Well, it's good to, you're looking pretty good for all that, and it's good to hear you pulled through.
Well, I've survived stage 4 cancer, fall off 90-foot poles, many car accidents. I used to race cars, flew planes, even once jumped out of a plane. I would never recommend that again, unless you really somebody would have to pay me to do that again.
Yeah, I won't be doing that. Before we let you go, how can voters learn more about you?
They can go on my website, www.everlyforiowa.com. I would like to encourage them. I have a series of things I'm most concerned about, and I've had to adjust them because of the time that we live in. But I also have my bio that tells about where I've been and just a short version of the things I've done in my 69 years on this earth. And I'm proud of every one of them. One of the most things I'm proud about is I was a foster care parent. I had many foster kids, and I have 5 adopted kids. And I am very pro-life. And I'm also a member of the Iowa Firearms Coalition, lifetime member, and also a lifetime member of the NRA. I think we are losing our freedoms, and this is a time we live in a world of wolves. It's time for us not to be sheep.
Very good. Well, it's nice meeting you, and we appreciate you joining this evening, and have a good rest of your night.
Oh, I plan on it. I'm still working. I only have 375 emails to answer yet tonight, but I don't know if I'll get through them all. So you have a wonderful day. God bless you. And I hope everybody has a great time listening on this, because I think it's a good civics lesson for everyone.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Rick Phillips, who will be joining us. Okay, we'll get him connected here. Hello.
Hi,
Greetings.
how are you doing?
Very good. It's nice to meet you.
You too, sir.
So like the others, we'll spend about 15 minutes chatting together. So to get started, can you introduce yourself and whatever opening remarks you'd like to give?
Okay, my name is Rick Phillips and I'm from Pella. I'm running for Congress because I kind of got tired of all the socialism and communism and the Islam being shoved down our throats. So since I'm a constitutional Republican, I decided to get into this race and present a few of those views.
So maybe tell us a little bit about your background, your biography, more about you, so folks can understand a little bit more where you're coming from.
Okay, I attended North Mahaska Community Schools from kindergarten to 12th grade. I graduated with the class of 1978, and most of my class went to Washington, D.C. for their class trip. I went to MCRD San Diego and joined the Marine Corps and spent 4 years in there. And then after I got out, I went into business with my dad, and I worked at a vacuum cleaner repair store from, well, actually before I went to the Marine Corps till even up to now, running a mobile service. So that's my day job, vacuum cleaner repairman. So I deal with everybody's dirt. I have a little bit of college. I attended Indian Hills for the criminal justice program for 2 years. I have 2 years in Christian ministries and a half a year in American history and biology. No degrees, so I consider myself to be a 17th grade dropout. Other than that, I ran for the U.S. House once before, 1996, 24 years ago, and this was the old 3rd district. So this is my second time around. I said I was never going to do this again, but here I am. And that's really about it. I'm just a simple everyday guy that's worked an everyday job, lived real life experiences, and have many of my viewpoints are from the bottom of the pile. I've never really been on the top of it. So, I don't know what it's like to be a millionaire or anything like that. So every day's a struggle and just an everyday guy. And I like to read the Constitution. And And because as a politician, when we swear the oath, this is what we swear the oath to, to keep the provisions of it, to protect your rights. So that's basically what I'm here for.
Very good. And obviously there's several candidates running there in the second district. Can you tell us why you feel that you're the best one to represent the voters of the district?
Well, I think they're all good people. You know, I think whoever the people decide to elect will be a good choice. They're all good people, but I'm probably the most tenacious and the most constitutional. And that's why I would be a good choice, because I can point out things that our government is doing that they shouldn't be doing at the federal level. And there's also things they're not doing that they need to be doing at the federal level. And while my opponents cover many areas, I like to go off into the areas that are not covered, like abolishing the federal Department of Education, securing the borders, our constitutional money supply, the national debt, even our Second Amendment, you know, no red flag laws and such like that.
And obviously one of the big things going on right now is coronavirus and that response. How do you feel about the government's response to that?
The government should have treated us like adults. They should have told us, you know, give us the facts. And as adults, we can determine our own safety and our own security. I don't see where, now it's tragic that we've lost 100,000 American lives to this, that it's reported to us as, but there's also about 30 million people who have lost their livelihoods and their jobs. And this is a travesty. So I think the cure was far worse than the cause, because it's going to take a while to dig back out of this, and some of us will never come back. So I don't agree with it. You know, I've kind of decided I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going to get a vaccine. I don't trust the people that's promoting this stuff. So, you know, here's the argument. My body, my choice. They use that in other places.
As far as Congress goes, what is something you feel that Congress has done well? And then where do you feel is the most room for improvement?
Oh boy, what have they done well? Well, that's a hard one. But where they need improvement is just telling the folks that the federal government is not God. We're not the Lord and Savior of mankind. You have all the power. You, the citizen, the American citizen, you can make decisions and choices better for yourself than getting a hold of me and waiting 14 years for the Congress to react to something and do something, which is often going to make things worse than what it ever was in the beginning. The government has all these euphemistic wars, like the war on poverty, the war on teen pregnancy, the war on illiteracy. Everything that they do, that they set out to fix, often gets worse. So, you know, there's just some things that the government shouldn't be involved with. They're not the parent. They're not the teacher. They're not the banker. They're not your business partner. They need to leave you alone so that you can use your liberty to become the best person that you want to become. Whatever problems you have, I bet you can find the federal government lurking around somewhere.
Mm-hmm. What are ways that voters can learn more about you?
I have a website. Since I'm kind of a one-man band, I do everything, but I do the best I can. But my website is www.theswampfox.net. I chose the Swamp Fox because I'm from Marion County. Marion was named after Brigadier General Francis Marion of the Revolutionary War. He was known for his unorthodox and different combat tactics, and that kind of fits me in a way, because I'm not your conventional politician. I don't pretend to be. I just rather, since I'm just one of the regular guys here, I just say how it is, how I've seen it in my life. And the government really has not been much of a help for any of us. And that's because they step outside of the boundaries of their duty, the Constitution.
One issue right now is agriculture and renewable fuels. I know have been hit really hard through this pandemic response. Are there things that you feel that Congress needs to do in those two areas to help those sectors of the economy revive?
The one thing that I'm hearing from the local farmers is they can't figure out why they get paid so little for beef and their pork and their crops. But yet by the time this stuff makes it to the shelf, the prices increased like 5 or 6 times. I'm interested in finding out why that is, and see if there might be a way. Right now, I think maybe just going back to the way it used to be before everything got commercialized here, and the local farmers supplied the local restaurants and the local communities. They had meat lockers, they had restaurants. The eggs that they cooked for breakfast came from the chickens that just laid them that morning. A lot of them farmed, and they butchered their own meat, and it went to the dinner tables, and it cut out a lot of the middleman. And the other thing is that bothers me is China is buying up a lot of stuff. Right now, China is not our best friend. So I just say beware.
And speaking of China, are there things that you would like to see Congress do in that regard?
If there's any time to become like, I'm not saying not keep an eye on China, but let's make everything here in America. Let's buy American. Anything made in China needs to be sent back. Let's start. We have 330 million people. I'm not sure of the exact number. It could be 360. I hear somewhere in there, but we have enough people here where we could create our own economy. And, the global economy is one thing, and I have nothing against anybody wanting to reach out and have tentacles around the world in that, but let's take care of America first.
So one question that came in the chat is from Nathaniel.
Okay.
He's concerned about in Social Security benefits, how folks that do get employment then have their benefits reduced. So it discourages folks that are disabled to go out and get a job. Are there things that you think that Congress can do to try to solve that situation?
That's a very good question, and I have an answer, and I hope we have time for it because we might have to spend a couple minutes. Okay. All right. In 1913, we started the Federal Reserve Act. I find problems constitutionally with that. That same year, we have the 16th Amendment, the progressive income tax. Then along in 1934, that is the last year that we have gold in circulation. It's pulled out. What comes along next in 1935 besides the Parker Brothers game of Monopoly? Social Security. 1964, we find the same thing happening. We have silver taken out of circulation, our 90% silver coin. The next year, 1965, comes along the Great Society of LBJ. This is the biggest expansion of welfare, housing, labor, everything. We removed our golden years and our silver years and exchanged them for government junk. And Social Security that Nathaniel is concerned about is tied into the golden years. Now, it's outdated. I would say that, everybody over 40 or 45, whatever age that a Congress can come up with that's workable, finish out what we're started, keep our promises. For those that's already retired, you can't really change horses in midstream. But for the younger people, like 40 or under, 35 or under, let's bring back our gold and silver standard. Now, I'm not going to belabor you with how this would work, but let's bring it back and let's let them, work on their own retirements. Let's show them ways. There's plenty of intelligent people that know how to do this. And unfortunately, a lot of them are not in government. Most of them are in the private sector. I'm not the one that has all the answers because I'm just a politician. You have the answers. You're like a speedboat. When you need to turn, you can turn, and you can do it suddenly. I'm like the Titanic. It takes years and years and years. You know, you're an old man by the time anything changes.
Mhm.
So, you know, we need to get the government out of people's business and do what the government is set to do in the United States Constitution. That's our roadmap to success.
So with that, we have about a minute left. Do you have any final thoughts you would like to leave folks with?
Yes, I can confidently say that I will come in 5th in this race on June 2nd. And a candidate can run. That's the only decision that I make. But it's really up to you folks to put me in first place. If you want a constitutionalist Republican representing you in Washington, D.C., instead of some professional politician being an ambassador coming back here to you and telling you what rights that you need to give up, what you need to surrender. No, I think it's time for Washington, D.C. to do a little sacrificing, and it's time for them to fall on the sword. Vote for Rick Phillips.
Very good. And that's about our time. So it was nice
Okay.
having you this evening. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, sir. You have a good night.
You too.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next guest just popped out of the waiting room here, Mr. Tim Borchardt. So hopefully he will pop back in here so we can bring him on to chat with you tonight. As we're waiting for Tim, if you have further thoughts or questions, please go ahead and leave those in the chat. We would love to get to those. And again, hopefully Tim pops in here shortly. If he doesn't, we will go to our final guest and then bring Tim in after that. So give me just a minute here and see if he pops back in here for us. Okay. Not seeing him come back yet. So let me go ahead and see if we can get one of the others in. Oh, here we go. I see him coming now. So let me go ahead and swap it out. Tim should be logging in. Okay, it's connecting to audio. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, Tim.
How are you today?
I'm very good. How are you?
Oh, I can't complain. Got the grill ready to go. Got the yard mowed. Take care of this bit of business and on to the evening.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for some nice weather. I like the month of May. It's been
no kidding. We've had kind of a crummy May. Couple days, but mostly not so good.
Yeah. So maybe to get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and whatever other opening remarks you would like to begin with?
Okay. Well, my name's Tim Borchardt. I live in Iowa City. I'm married. I've got a 9-year-old and 11-year-old children, a boy and a girl that attend public school. I grew up in Washington, Iowa, just south of here. And in my middle 20s, I moved to Iowa City. So I've spent maybe 90% of my life either in Washington or Johnson County, and Southeast Iowa is my home. I enjoy the people. I can go just about anywhere. Feel like I fit right on in. So I work in retail. My wife works at a packing plant, and we're just a couple of regular family, just trying to get along just like everybody else.
Sure. So what got you into this race?
Well, I've always had an interest in politics, and I've tried to follow it fairly closely. And to be perfectly honest with you, this should be a Republican seat. And when I started seeing who was interested in running, I figured we could do better than that. And so me and a few buddies decided that we were going to get me on the ballot, and we did. I'm an average person, and I figured I could do just as good or better than any of the people that had indicated an interest in running for the seat again.
Very good. And obviously, there's several candidates, as you mentioned, in the second district. So why do you feel you would best represent the district?
Because it's my home. It's my hometown, home area. From Centerville to Clinton to Keokuk to Kyoto. I've been all over that. I've got family in Wayland, Iowa. I've been, like I said, everywhere. I am a Southeast Iowan. It's time that we have someone, a regular person from Southeast Iowa, representing us.
So as far as Congress goes, obviously that's the job you're hoping to get. So what do you feel something that Congress has done well, and where do you feel they have the most room for improvement?
Well, it's been in the 2 years that the Republicans held all three branches of government. I thought they did well in reducing the corporate tax rate and other tax rates. Where I don't think they've done so well is putting together a plan to try to get to a balanced budget and then eventually reduce our deficit. Both parties, I guess I would say, have just kind of given up on trying to work toward a balanced budget.
Very good. There's a good question here in the chat that I'm going to take from Nathaniel. It says, Tim, what are your plans to make sure the southwestern part of the district is equally represented as Scott and Johnson counties tend to have more prominence, and how are you going to address economic development and housing in those border counties?
Well, actually, I'm more comfortable down in, so to speak, Lapland and southern counties than I am here in Johnson County, but I will represent the entire district, and I will hope that on issues that both the red and the blue can get together 70 or 80% agreement, that I can support those issues and support our district's policy. Now, as far as economic development, I've been down to Albia, Centerville, Bloomfield, even in some cases Washington. The downtowns especially have been devastated. They're half full. The businesses have moved out. I would like to support through the state economic development that would try to instruct the businesses in the small towns to come up with a mixture of both e-commerce and brick and mortar. The most successful retailers have been able to do that. I remember when I lived in Washington, we drove up to Iowa City. Drove up to Iowa City to try to get more selection. Today, if our retailers in those small towns can offer that combination, they have a chance to not only shop locally, have people shop locally, but expand their services outside of their community.
So obviously one big thing right now is coronavirus and the government response to that. What are your opinions on the government response to the pandemic?
Initially, in the first couple week period that everything kind of fell apart, I supported Governor Reynolds and her pause, but I also had a concern of just how easily people were willing to give up their rights just in a blink of an eye. After that 2-week period, I thought we needed to start opening the things back up because the doctors have been wrong. I mean, they've been wrong. They preach doom and gloom, millions of people dying, and I understand that pause. But after that point, we needed to open back up, and we're finding more and more stuff every day about the virus. Today, the CDC came out and said, well, touching things is not really a very good way to get the virus. I mean, the narrative is changing all the time. The American people will do the right thing. We need to open back up. Let the business owners do not want people sick, so they've got to convince their consumers that they have a good area to do it. But my biggest disagreement with Governor Reynolds was when she said that they could issue citations for someone not following her rules. So in the beginning, I'll summarize, yes, it was good. I thought we needed to pause while we were trying to get our wits about it. But after that, the government shutdown and restrictions were needed to go, in my opinion.
And one of the areas I know that's been impacted, and we hear a lot about, especially from Senator Grass and Ernst, Grassley and Ernst. The agriculture sector, renewable fuels have been hit pretty hard through this. Are there ways that you feel that Congress should address those two parts of those two segments of the industry in our economy?
Well, it's imperative. Congress just needs to kind of get out of the way and get the economy back up and running. My brother-in-law runs a truck and hauls livestock here in southern Iowa, and the farmers are pushing the weight limits of which the pack plants are willing to take because the overall throughput isn't there. My wife works at a pack plant, and the problem there is that it's a labor shortage. They had at the plant she works at, they tested everybody in the plant, 100 and some had it. People were just afraid to come back to work. So really the issue is just getting the consumption and the demand up again. Congress has spent money, sent it out to the folks. It's just confidence, people going to work, and confidence, people going and shopping and feeling things are going to be good. I don't think Congress can do much in the short term right now.
There's some other chatter here about, like you mentioned, there is job creation, but one issue in some of those counties are housing. Do you have any ideas for ways to address that need?
Housing and I guess I don't understand the question. Lack thereof, too expensive.
Wayne and Decatur counties have jobs being created, but no available housing. And then somebody else chimed in and said there's an issue with unaffordable housing as well.
Well, here in Iowa City, we have some of the most and I realize they're talking about a different area, but I'm getting to the point. The city of Iowa City makes living in Iowa City way expensive with the taxes, with the water rates. It costs me, I'm guessing, between $250 and $300 just to live in the city. If the cities will look at their tax structures and cost structures and see what they can do to make it more affordable for people to move into the area. I'm not necessarily in favor of the government getting into the housing business, but in some cases, some areas might promote growth in their area by waiving some of their fees for a period of time so that it would make it more affordable for a homeowner to be in there. As far as building houses, if there's a demand, eventually the contractor should be there.
So obviously we're doing this for young Republicans. What are your thoughts on why and how young people should get involved?
It's your future. It's your future. If you don't take an interest right now, before you know it, it will be so out of control that you will be given a paddle or to drain the water on the Titanic. I've got a 9 and 11-year-old son and daughter, as I said, and when the stimulus came out, some of my more liberal friends wanted to poke me and say, "Hey, you're going to turn down the stimulus, aren't you?" And I said, well, I've got two choices. I can either accept the stimulus, use some of it to put into a savings account for my kids' college, and then they will pay for it, or I can turn it down and my kids are still going to pay for it. Young Republicans need to get involved so that they can help shape the future, because it's your future too.
How can voters learn more about you?
Well, I've got a webpage up, Vote Tim for Congress, that lists some of my positions. I have a Facebook page. Anybody who wants to can email me, and I will be more than happy to get back with any specific questions you might have. I work for a living, so I'll get to it just as soon as I can. But like I said, I got a webpage up that outlines several positions on healthcare, the Second Amendment, college tuition, life. I've hit all the big ones, and I'm pretty solid conservative here.
We hit on college tuition. Obviously, you're in a college town there, Iowa City, and I'm a graduate of the University of Iowa myself and know very much what student loans mean. And that's obviously an issue that young voters care about and young Republicans will. So do you have any ideas that you'd like to talk about regarding tuition and student loans?
Sure. I believe that our federal government has flooded the market with money, just flooded it. And those were all with the best intentions. But what it comes down to is the student absorbing all the debt. I believe that the federal government needs to loan the money to the colleges, who then in turn will loan it to their prospective students, so that both the college and the student will have skin in the game as far as the student being successful, not getting in over their head. Because right now, the student's on the hook. The college has no skin in the game. They can charge whatever they want because the federal government just makes the money available. And then we end up with kids with 1, 2, 3, 4 years in degrees, some degrees, some no, that have a pile full of debt that is retarding their life as far as moving on to the next level. The colleges need to be accountable, not just the students. I talked to many people that 50, 60, even 70 years old, and they all say the same thing. When I was going to college, it wasn't the tuition that was the problem. It was the room and board. Today, the colleges just keep hiking it up because, you know, they're not held accountable and the money's available. So the students just say, yep, okay, colleges need to be held accountable as well as the students.
Very good. So with that, we have about a minute left. So are there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
No, I would just say that I'm an average person who will work hard when elected to Congress. I hope that I can bring both red and blue together in Southeast Iowa, and so that we can have discussions on topics without thinking people are a bad person. If we've been sending our best and brightest to Washington, D.C., we need to rethink who we think are consider the best and brightest, because most of them have been failing us. They're just sticking us with the bill. They go to Washington, point fingers at each other, come home, get rich. So working man with a family, looking for your vote.
Thank you very much. And that's our time. So we appreciate having you this evening and coming on.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'm going to fire up the grill.
Sounds good. Enjoy.
Thank you. I will.
Okay, so as far as the second district goes, we talked a little bit about the beginning about Bobby Schilling and the unfortunate news about his cancer battle, and we're thinking about him and praying for him today as he goes through that. And so unfortunately, he won't be able to hop on today, but if he feels well, we'll definitely give him an opportunity to come on another time. So speaking of that, we did have last week at a first district forum, and we have a candidate who would like to come on this evening that wasn't able to make it. I believe this is him. So I'm going to go ahead and click admit. You should be connected to audio here. Okay, Thomas. Let's see, I can see you. Worst case, if you can't get the audio connected, there is a phone number. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, here we go. Looks like it's connecting.
There.
Perfect.
Okay.
I'm Brett. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Brett.
Thanks for coming on. So as we get started with the other candidates, we asked them all to introduce themselves and give us some of their background.
Okay. Just want personal background or political background, or?
You can go with both.
Okay. That'll be fine.
Yes. So go ahead and tell us kind of your background and
okay.
what you do, where you're from, those types of things.
Okay. Well, I was born in Long Island, New York, and I was raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I wound up here in Iowa because out in Las Vegas, my neighbors were an intern minister and his wife from Decorah. And when they decided to move back to Decorah, they had their friend Jeanette come out to help them. And I met her actually the last day that she was there because they needed help loading the heavy stuff on the U-Haul. And so I helped, and Jeanette and I wound up staying up all night and exchanging our life stories. And the next day was Monday. She got in the U-Haul and she left. And that next Friday, I flew into La Crosse, Wisconsin. I drove down to Decorah, Iowa. I found her and I asked her to marry me. And December 26th of last year, we celebrated 32 years together.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so she came out there for about a year and a half, and then her parents needed help back on the farm back here. She was the fourth generation on her farm. And so we moved back here in 1989, and I opened up Hansen Refrigeration. And about 5 years after that, her father was one of the founders of the Iowa Hereford Association, and he had horned Herefords, and nobody wanted the horned Herefords anymore. So I used my influence with the restaurants that I did business refrigeration work for, and I used her experience in the meat business. She's been in it over 45 years now, and we started Rock Cedar Ranch Beef, and we sell to local restaurants and to customers in the area. So, and we have one daughter that's a nurse up in Rochester. And I've been politically active all of my life. I guess I started my political activity back when I was 18 years old. I was a graduate of the apprenticeship program for the operating engineers out there, and I didn't like the union taking my union dues and supporting candidates that I didn't support. So I became active out there in politics and trying to change that. When we came back here, I just carried that with me. And I've been active up in Winneshiek County. I started the Northeast Iowa Tea Party up there in 2009. And then when the Republican Party was kind of dying out up there, I took my Tea Party members and we revitalized the Republican Party of Winneshiek County up there. I'm chairman of that. I've been that for 9 years now. And I've been on the state platform committee for almost 8 years. And I was part of the team that redid the Republican State Party platform. We made it a little more concise. We condensed it, and it's actually used by the legislators now to promote legislation down in Iowa, down in Des Moines.
So they put it into sections?
Yep. Yeah, well, the first time I was on it, I believe there was 452 planks, and our principles on the front used to change every year. And we decided, well, principles are supposed to be principles and they shouldn't change. And they've been the same since that time. And I think we're down to about 60 legislative priorities now. So it gives the legislature down in Iowa a good idea of what people want and what's their priorities. And they've been using it now for the last several years to actually push legislation. You can use it almost as a checklist now. Every 2 years, you can go through it and check things off. So it's worked very well.
Very good.
So,
and you mentioned your agriculture background. So right now, obviously, agriculture and renewable fuels have both been impacted by the pandemic. And do you have certain ideas that you'd like to take to Congress around how to bring those two sectors of the economy back?
Yeah, with the whole ethanol deal, I'm not a proponent of ethanol. I've studied a lot of economics, and one lesson that I've learned is the one from Henry Hazlitt in his book, One Lesson on Economics, is that good economic policy benefits everybody over the long run. And bad economic policy is designed for a specific group over the short run. And that's what we've seen with ethanol. It's designed for just a small group of people. It has to be highly subsidized to work. And I think what President Trump is doing with revamping our trade deals with all the nations in the Far East, and now we're talking about redoing with England. I think those agricultural fair trade policies that he's trying to get passed is going to do more for the American farmer than ethanol ever has. And my other thing that I want to do for agriculture here in Iowa is that our biggest problem we have is the age of our farmers. Median age of farmers now, I believe, is 62 years old. And we have a lot of farmers that want to retire and pass their land along. But a lot of farmers here in Iowa, they don't have 401k retirement programs. Their retirement is the land that they have, and they have to get as much for it as they can in order to take care of themselves when they retire. So one of the plans that I've put forward is to redefine the definition of a family farm. And that would be any tract of land that is owned by, lived upon, and worked by the same person. And if someone meets those qualifications, then the retiring farmer can sell the land to that person tax-free, and allows him to sell it to at a much lower price to that person. And it allows us to bring new young farmers onto the land. So that's one of the things I would like to see done, because we're having a real problem with getting those young people on the land. If you look at the FFA groups in high school, that they're full. There's a lot of people in FFA. They want to farm, and I think they did a survey 1 or 2 years ago, and their biggest problem that they were having was trying to find land, trying to buy land, because they had to compete with bigger farmers. And I think my plan will give them an edge on getting onto the land and being able to get back into farming.
Very good. One of the other things, we hit on those sectors being hit by the pandemic. So that's one of the big topics right now. What's your feeling on the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic?
Right from the start, I said this was being done the wrong way. I didn't think shutting down the entire economy was the right way to handle this. I've always said that I look at everything through facts and logic. And if you look at the facts before this came over to the United States, this affected mainly the elderly and people with comorbidity problems. It hit them very hard. So my plan right from the beginning was to take care of those people, quarantine those people, use whatever resources we had to take care of those people, and allow everybody to keep working, because it didn't seem to affect younger people all that much. I know just from the stats over in South Korea, they had nobody below 50 that was affected by it, and Japan had nobody below 30 that was affected by it. And I think just blatantly shutting down the entire economy is going to do a lot more damage to America down the road than this virus will ever have done. And you're starting to see that now with doctors coming out and talking about the mental health effects, the effects of people that have gone into poverty, the anxiety that's created by not working and having bills to pay. So that was my plan was always to do something like South Dakota did. Take care of the high-risk people and keep the rest of the economy going, and take care of the people as needed.
And it's going to take over coming back out of this. So are there certain ideas you have on how best to bring the economy back?
Open everything up. And I think this gives us a golden opportunity to push some things that have needed to be done all along with our economy. We have learned now that we really exported too much of our production here in America, especially things that are vital in situations like this. And President Trump, before this had started, had done things with taxes, loosening up regulations to bring the businesses back. And I think this gives us an opportunity now to really push forward with those things, with a really comprehensive tax program, and with loosening up more regulations. Being in the beef business that we are in, we run into a lot of this because over the last couple of decades, the federal government has driven small and medium processing plants out of business, and with overregulation. And what we have wound up with is just having these big plants, And we've seen what's happened now in a situation like this when these big plants shut down. And I believe it'd be much better to have 50 smaller plants than one large Tyson plant. We can still have a large processing plant because we're always going to need that for the production to supply enough protein to the citizens here in America. But having smaller facilities, if we get an outbreak in one facility, we can completely shut the facility down, take care of it, and keep the other ones going and keep production up. So we don't have to go through this process that we're seeing right now of euthanizing millions of pigs and cattle. Everyone's real upset about that, thinking that we can give that to food shelters to help out. And it's not because we don't know what to do with these cattle. It's just because we don't have the production capacity in order to process that and get them there, because we've been shutting these plants down. So, this is, like I said, an opportunity that we can loosen up those regulations. My wife has worked in a USDA plant, a state inspected plant, and a custom plant. And she says by far the USDA plants are the dirtiest. She says the smaller production facilities, their business depends on them never doing anything wrong. They can't produce 1 million pounds of bad ground beef and stay in business. They have to be very careful and very clean with everything. And you never hear of small processing facilities having an outbreak of E. coli, because they just don't. They do a much better job with it. And this, like I said, it should give us an opportunity to open up these facilities again and open up other production plants like this. And I think that's going to go a long way into revitalizing the economy. And we can also, use this to address the immigration issue. There's a lot of things that President Trump was trying to get done beforehand to help out our economy that people have seen the effects of not addressing these things right now. And so this gives us an opportunity to get these things done.
So where's how can voters learn more about you?
I have a website, HansenForCongress.com. One of the things that I think sets me apart from my opponents on either side of the aisle is I was always taught, I was raised in an engineering background and a mechanical background, and I was always taught that never start any project without having plans, or never criticize somebody else's idea without having a better one of your own. And so that was one of the first things I did when I entered this campaign. Was I laid out all my plans on what I wanted to do on taxes, on immigration, healthcare, because my family's been without healthcare for 23 years, without health insurance. The agricultural issues, I've laid out plans of what I want to do and how I want to do them, and I put them all on my website. Everybody can go there and read them and learn exactly about what I want to do.
Very good. And there's about a minute left. So with that, I'll leave it to you to decide what closing thoughts you want to leave us with.
I guess the one other thing that I want to stress is that I've already stated that I'm not going to go to Washington and work with people that want to weave any kind of socialist agenda into the fabric of America. I'm willing to work with anybody as long as they're willing to work within the confines of the Constitution, because I said trying to appease people that are doing bad things has never worked well in the history of the world. I always bring up the picture of Lord Chamberlain getting off the plane with his peace plan from Adolf Hitler. It doesn't work. You have to stand by your principles, keep pushing them forward, do the right thing. And in the end, that will work much better than trying to appease people who are trying to change America and make it into a more socialist country.
Very good. And with that, the timer's running out, so we appreciate you coming on. I apologize. There were a couple questions that came in here right at the end about a minute ago. Didn't get to those, but we appreciate you coming in, and have a good night.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
And for those of you that joined us tonight, we appreciate that as well. This is a series we've been doing called YR Live, and it's been going really well. We had a district with a forum with the 4th district candidates. We've had a forum with 1st and 3rd, and we had this one tonight that was focused on the 2nd District. We also had a discussion with Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate about the election, and so we've been continuing to do these. We have Lieutenant Governor Adam Gregg coming on in a couple weeks, so watch for information about that. I believe it's on June 2nd, primary day, so make sure you get your ballots in for that. And also, we'd love your support. You can learn more about us at iowawire.com. As we mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, Senator Grassley's been a huge supporter of ours, and he has a challenge match still out there. We have $230 left before we reach his cap, so we would love to finish raising that. If you like what you see, we're looking for resources because we want to deploy across the state in the general election here in the fall and make a big impact. So you can check us out at iowawire.com. We appreciate your time tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on the next forum. And thank you very much.